If they continue to take this approach, if you take what you did today and continue to build on this today, dink and dunk your way down the field. You have two accomplished tight ends, two very good, sure-handed tight ends. Utilize them. You can't cover both. The defense can't cover both of them. Utilize them. Use the short to intermediate passing game to set up your shots over the top. Because, whereas a lot of teams may have just one speedster, and you can always cheat a little bit to his side thinking he's going to go at any given moment. The Eagles have three guys.
I don't think we touched on this yet. The shovel pass and our defense not making adjustments. What was it, twice? Their first two touchdowns, and just no changes were made.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Live post-game show, 6bc.com, as well as JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Mark Farzetta, Derek Gunn, Devin Caney with you. Just joined by John McMullen from Lincoln Financial Field. We are exclusively presented by Ocean Casino Resort. Book your next weekend at Ocean Casino. Go for the win with Ocean Casino. Let's react to a couple of things from John McMullen. But first off, we're going to have a little conflicting reports. How about that? These are always fun. Somebody says one thing, somebody says something else, and they're not the same thing. Gunner, you love these, don't you?
Oh, I love them. Yeah.
Especially
when I'm not involved.
Oh, yeah, you're not. Don't worry. It's nobody saying anything against what you've said. But getting this again from Eagles beat writer Jeff McClain of Inquirer.com. The timeout that was called on the first possession in the red zone. Jalen Hurts called the timeout on the fourth down play on the Eagles' first drive to avoid a delay of game. Mm-hmm. Nick Sirianni. Now, Jalen Hurts said he called timeout to avoid delay of game. John McMullen just told us, and according to Nick Sirianni said he got the play in late. Now, Hurts said there was an assumed delay, which probably explains why Sirianni kicked the field goal.
Right.
But still, bottom line is, once you know you're kicking the field goal after the delay of game, once you were awarded the timeout and not the delay of game, why are you kicking the field goal in that situation anyway?
Growing pains.
Oh,
growing pains, and let's face it, it comes with time. It comes with time, and I'm looking at a lot of social media comments, and people are screaming the sky is falling. With this team. What did you expect from this team going into this season?
Yeah.
All off season from March, April, May, June, July. The consensus was we know it's going to be a rough year. We know it's a growing team. We know we don't have this and we don't have that. But now that the season's here, oh my goodness, I can't believe how bad it is. Okay, it is bad in some regards. But did you honestly think it was going to be a lot better than what we're seeing right now? If you're being realistic about this, did you honestly think, did we all bite for the fool's gold? Is that the case? That they fooled us in that first game against Atlanta, and we thought it's a whole lot better than what it really is. Because I'll admit, after that first game, I'm thinking, wow, maybe I was wrong about this team. After even the second game, after San Francisco. You know what? This team can stand up and slug with the big boys. Okay. But after that third game against Dallas, I'm like, you know what? You fooled me once, but you're not going to get me twice. Mm-hmm. So now with me, it's a wait and see issue. So, people, you got to open your eyes and be realistic about this. It is what it is with this team. They're going to steal a game here and there that maybe they shouldn't win. But for the most part, sit back, take your medicine, and endure it.
But I'm already getting sick of the phrase growing pains and kind of blaming everything on that. And what really bothered me about our conversation with John and him relaying to us what Nick Sirianni said in his press conference was the fact that we talk about discipline, and it doesn't seem saying Jalen Hurts, that was one of the best quarterback performances. I mean, I thought he was good.
Yeah.
That was not accurate.
Yeah.
And kind of taking the blame off Andre Dillard for the penalty. You have to discipline guys if you want them to make these changes. You can't keep using growing pains. They're a young team. Yes, Rager and Devontae Smith stepped out of bounds, but Nick Sirianni was a wide receiver coach. That shouldn't be happening.
Yeah,
So I just think there's a certain amount of discipline that needs to be enforced.
See, I know what he's doing. He's trying to show support for his players. And, some coaches like the old Grizzly coaches back in the day, the Vince Lombardis, the Chuck Knowles, the guys like this, they'd have called a player out in a minute, But these coaches nowadays coaching these particular type players, they're trying to pep them up. They're trying to, encourage them. It's okay. We're going to get through this. You can't coach a lot of these players like you used to coach them anymore. I get that. And if he wants this thing to not just unravel before his very eyes, I mean, that's the approach you have to take. Because see, now if you just start singling out guys, you know what? If so-and-so doesn't get his bleep out of his behind, he's going to be sitting on the bench. You do that. And then all of a sudden players start retaliating. Well, you know what? If you called a better game, so it becomes a serve and volley. And that's the last thing you need in a locker room, especially in a situation like this when you've now lost 3 consecutive games and it's gotten worse and worse every week.
Mm-hmm. And those 2 plays that we did see from Reagor against San Francisco 49ers and then the play we did see again from Devontae Smith today, I thought they were very similar plays, but then again, why you make – I know it's 2 different players, but why are you allowing that same mistake to happen? I mean, a good thing from Devontae Smith would have been learning from somebody else's mistake so you don't make the same one. And I know there was contact on both. There was some hand fighting, but both those guys are young receivers, and maybe they're not used to the amount of contact that they're going to have on those given plays.
Right.
Just looking for an explanation, certainly not an excuse. But when it comes to this particular game, and you think about Nick Sirianni and what this offense did as a whole, there are no moral victories, and I'm not saying there are. But there are some things that you did as an offense in this game that you can certainly take, and I hope you apply next week against the Carolina Panthers.
Right.
Let's look at one of them. Motion. How novel an idea. Actually move a wide receiver or running back pre-snap to see what the defense is going to give you, or also keep them guessing as to where Kenny Gainwell is going to be. I loved how much you saw Kenny Gainwell get the ball in this particular game, especially in the passing game. I love seeing Miles Sanders actually catch the ball, not just catch the ball, but get an opportunity to catch the ball out of the backfield. Jalen Reagor, bubble screens. Quez Watkins, bubble screens.
Yes.
You also saw the tight ends get involved.
Yes.
I thought they were finally going to get rewarded for using their tight ends in a game,
Right.
and they ended up getting touchdowns called back. Or Zach Ertz had the drop, or the play that we talked about earlier, first possession, that you had Hurts overthrow Ertz in the end zone. There were so many times you tried to get your tight ends involved, all plays around the line of scrimmage, even the one downfield to Zach Ertz later in the game. You got your tight ends involved. You take motion, you take away those quick passes out of the backfield, you take tight end usage, the way they used it in this particular game, and you apply that against the Panthers, you can win that game against a very, very good defense.
Yes,
but that's
indeed.
how my overall point is, that's where I think the offense is at its best. And I know people love to harp on run-to-pass ratio. Last week, certainly. This week, the short plays around the line of scrimmage were working. Right. Maybe you can make more of an argument when you're talking about red zone efficiency and actually scoring touchdowns, not just field goals in the red zone by running the football more. But overall, throughout this game, I felt the game plan with run versus pass was well executed by this offense. And those are things I want to see them not just taking the next week, but the rest of the season.
If they continue to take this approach, if you take what you did today and continue to build on this today, dink and dunk your way down the field. You have 2 accomplished tight ends, 2 very good, sure-handed tight ends. Utilize them. You can't cover both. The defense can't cover both of them. Utilize them. Use the short to intermediate passing game to set up your shots over the top. Because, whereas a lot of teams may have just one speedster, and you can always cheat a little bit to his side thinking he's going to go at any given moment. The Eagles have 3 guys. You can send Jalen Reagor down the seam on a fly pattern. You can send Quez off this side. You can send Devontae off this side. You have different ways that you can strike long-range aerial attacks. But to set it up, middle screen to your running back, swing pass to your running back, just like Farzi's talking about. Dink and dunk to your tight ends. Take those 5, 6, 7, 8 yards. But I do say add a little bit more to the running game as well. I'm looking at this Kansas City stat sheet right now. 32 rushing attempts, 30 passes. That's balance.
Is that an Andy Reid coach team? Did Andy Reid do that?
Balance. Yeah, but you know what? When Andy Reid was here, think about this. We screamed Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, run the football more, But see, Andy Reid goes to Kansas City. He has a completely different offensive mindset, different offensive coordinator, has one of the better coordinators in the game now, calling the plays for him and telling him what to do. And you see a more evolved type offense with Andy Reid. He still wants his quick strike offense, but he's got more of a running game now. He still uses the pass to set up the run, but it's more of a balance attack. And they identify, hey, look, we can drive an 18-wheeler through this Eagles defense and run all day. Why not run the ball? Yeah. We're still going to score. They can't stop us. We're still going to score. 32 rushing attempts, 30 passes. That's balance at its finest.
I just have to say this. When I think it was Charles Davis that it was when he was making the call today. At one point, they were talking about the run-to-pass ratio, and Charles Davis just goes, "That is vintage Andy Reid, finding that balance." And I went, "I'm sorry, what? Come again? What was that?"
Really? Who are you talking about?
I did a radio hit for some friends in Kansas City throughout the week, and they asked me, "Hey, do you hate Andy Reid?" And I said, "No, I don't hate Andy Reid." And I think the vast majority of Philadelphia does not hate Andy Reid. I think the vast majority of Philly, when they won the Super Bowl, when he won the Super Bowl, they thought, "Hey, good for Andy." No one was throwing a parade here for Andy, that they were winning a Super Bowl. But people were like, "Oh, hey, good for Andy." And then they moved on with their life. It didn't affect him either way. But I always thought Andy Reid was going to have more success in his next job, simply because you get your first job, you fall into the way you do things, and for 14 years, nobody comes along, and you don't really change things up too much. Right. It's not till you get a second or two to look back on your time in your first gig to go, all right, maybe I can do this different, maybe I'll do that different. And, of course, it doesn't hurt when you get Patrick Mahomes. But Andy Reid is a much better head coach than he was in Philadelphia. He's a much better head coach now in Kansas City, even without the Super Bowl, than he was here in Philadelphia. And I give him a lot of credit for having that balance today. And certainly in a game that I think if he was still Andy Reid, the Eagles head coach, that mindset, I think the Chiefs lose this game today. Because they never would have looked at the fourth quarter like, we'll just run the football, and that'll be it. We never saw that from Andy Reid when he was here in Philadelphia. But I'll give him a lot of credit. He's matured as a head coach. He was never a terrible coach, certainly stubborn at times, but he's a much better head coach than even Patrick Mahomes. No, Patrick Mahomes, still a better coach as far as a game plan goes, game planner goes than he was here in Philly.
Yeah.
On that note, in terms of Andy Reid play calling, I just have to say, I don't think we touched on this yet, the shovel pass. And our defense not making adjustments. What was it, twice? Their first two touchdowns, and just no changes were made. And it just like, come on, guys, see it coming.
Was it two? I think it was two to the tight end, and then one to the running back. If it wasn't a mistake.
You start. How many times can defense fall for this? I mean, really? Right. In the same game. How many times?
The same game.
Same game.
The same. Was it the same half too? Like it was. Exactly. It was just mind-blowing.
You're talking about Andy Reid, and as well as I know Andy Reid, it's funny how when he was here in his the latter part of his tenure, people couldn't wait to run him out of town. They wanted to help him pack and get out of town on the fastest jet out of here. And, and at times I talked to Andy Reid after the fact, he would tell you, he said, I knew it was time for me to go. He goes, I'm smart enough to know it was time. Mm-hmm. He just wore out his welcome here. But since Andy has found that a good measure of success in Kansas City, it's amazing how many people in Philadelphia have gotten back on the Andy Reid bandwagon, congratulating him for winning a Super Bowl, congratulating him on so many different accolades throughout his career. And it's nice to see people really step back and appreciate Andy Reid for who he truly is. Yeah. Now, it's funny, but Andy Reid is going to go down as one of the greatest coaches in the National Football League. I mean, you don't just win 100 games. And kudos to Andy, by the way. You don't win 100 games with two different organizations. Nobody else has done that before. Mm-hmm. So I don't care what you think about Andy Reid personally in terms of, doesn't give the media information, when he steps to the podium. That's deliberate. He doesn't want you to know any more than he wants you to know. But if you know Andy Reid away from a microphone and away from the masses, he's one of the funniest guys that I know. He's got a quick wit. And, he's also a pretty doggone good football coach because even when things are going bad, players want to play for Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. He can be the grandfather type to him. He can be the father figure type to him. He can also be a big brother, an older big brother, and he can also put a foot in there behind when he has to. Also, and when he it's true. Yeah. And when he yells at guys, a lot of coaches now have to be. And I talk about this all the time. A lot of coaches have to be careful how they coach certain players because they worry about players mentally shutting down. When Andy Reid gets on the players, it makes them focus. and play that much better. That's the ultimate respect in a game at its highest level.
Yeah, I will say Andy Reid became a much better coach when he started listening to the fans in Philadelphia about running the football. I'm just saying. Saying. That's what he became. That's really when he became a Hall of Fame coach.
Okay.
No, I mean, here's what I will say. He will be a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think that goes without saying. You talk about not just winning 100 games. I mean, 100 games with two teams is incredible. Taking two different teams to a Super Bowl, X amount of AFC championships or NFC championships with two different teams. That's pretty incredible for what he's done already. So he's now coached in 3 Super Bowls, winning one of them, 2 different teams over that span as well. Yeah, that's pretty impressive to go along with the numbers that he obtained today with 100. But I'll also say this. My opinion of Andy Reid as an Eagles head coach hasn't changed. Like, I've never looked at him and go, I wish Andy was still here. No, I've never, because if he was still here, we'd be looking at the same thing. What was that, Devin?
I'm sure people say that because I don't know if that's a Philly thing or just a fan thing in general. Because already today I'm seeing so many, and last week on Monday too, so many. We fired Doug Peterson for this guy, for Nick Sirianni. I miss Doug. Everyone always wants what they don't have.
That's not different. Yeah.
And especially with Andy Reid, because then he goes on to find success in Kansas City. But I agree. I also don't think, like when we talk about discipline, like Deegan, you mentioned Andy Reid wouldn't be afraid to kind of tell players when they messed up. I didn't get that sense from Doug Peterson either. I don't think Doug really disciplined players if they had the most penalties in the league, or I don't know, small things like that I think should be addressed by the coach.
No, I agree. It's Doug Peterson is from the Andy Reid coaching tree, but Doug being a lot younger, he had to use certain tactics as well. There's certain players he could get on, and then there are certain players that you have to kind of approach with kid gloves, and it's understandable, because the bottom line is when you're in a 16-game war in a season and it changes week to week, you don't want to have dissension in the locker room. And Doug was such a stickler, as well as Howie and Jeffrey, about having a certain locker room chemistry and camaraderie, because in a lot of times that's as big as going out and playing the game itself, is having a group of guys who enjoy playing together. Now, historically, there have been teams that have been successful where players hated each other and some would come to blows, but still would go out there and win games. You never knew about it. But it's a whole different ball game nowadays in a lot of ways. The mindset's a lot different. So, and I understand, Jeffrey and Howie want to build a certain culture. They don't want the outlaws in the locker room. That's why they don't bring in a lot of the bad boys that you see around the National Football League. And I have a lot of respect for that. Now, some people will say, well, he can play on that team and he's a Pro Bowler. Okay, I get that. But if you bring him in here, what is that saying about what you've tried to establish over the last 4, 5, 6 years? What you've told all of us as a fan base and in the media, that we want to have a certain type of player in our locker room. We have a certain standard that we expect for grown men who are being paid 6- and 7-figure incomes to maintain when they come here. We don't want one rebel coming here and unraveling that. They almost had that a while ago when they had a guy named T.O. in the Eagles uniform. He had a great one season, but of course it was a season with up and down turmoil that caused division. And then the next season, it unraveled to the point Andy Reid said, you know what? You're out. You got to go. You're a great player, but you got to go. And, so you don't want that, because that next year the Eagles could have had, I don't know about a Super Bowl appearance season, but they could have had a great season. Of course, the T.O. thing blew up, and then all of a sudden they just had a multitude of injuries, which really decimated that team the year after they went to the Super Bowl. But you have to be true to who you want to be and who you tell us you're going to be in a lot of ways. If you want players as a whole to respect what you're trying to establish, then you have to maintain a certain pecking order, a certain guideline that you established. When players come in here, they know that this guy and this guy have told me that I can't do this. I can't get away with this. So you can't bring in one guy. You can't bring another guy in here just because he can put the ball in the end zone. He can get you 10 or 12 sacks, but he's going to be off the cuff a lone wolf and do what the heck he wants to do. Because if the W's aren't surpassing the L's, that's a big problem, major problem in the locker room.
Yeah, I still would have sided with T.O. in that battle. Still would have kept him.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, when we come back, maybe the three of us will audition to be Eagles linebackers. We've talked a lot about the defensive line. we haven't touched a lot on the linebacker position here with the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll touch on that when we come back. But first, let me tell you, we are fueled by Stateside Vodka. See the scroll below, ladies and gentlemen. You can use code JAKIB, that's JAKIB, for 15% off a 1-liter bottle. Go to statesidevodka.com. That's statesidevodka.com. Talk about those Eagles linebackers when we